The worst part about discovering your wife is cheating isn't the betrayal. It's realizing you've been living with a stranger who's better at lying than you are at detecting bullshit. And I used to think I was pretty good at that. My name is Nick Callahan. And 3 days before my wedding, I found out my fiancée, Marissa Hart, was screwing her co-worker Greg Landry in the back seat of his vintage Mustang like a couple of horny teenagers. The kicker? She was still planning to marry me. I should probably back up. It started with the little things. Marissa working late more often, new lingerie I never got to see her wear, and a sudden obsession with CrossFit that had her leaving the house at 6 a.m. sharp every Tuesday and Thursday. When a woman who considers walking to the mailbox cardio suddenly develops a passion for burpees, you know something's up. The real red flag was her phone. Marissa used to leave it lying around like loose change. Suddenly, it was glued to her palm, face down on every surface, password protected tighter than Fort Knox. When I asked about it, she'd flash that PR executive smile and say something about client confidentiality or wedding stress. Wedding stress. Right. The only stress she was feeling was keeping her stories straight. I work in IT security for a mid-sized firm in downtown Chicago. My job is literally finding holes in systems that people think are bulletproof. So when my own fiancée started acting like she was running classified operations, my professional instincts kicked in. The Bachelorette party was last Saturday. Marissa claimed they were going to some upscale wine bar in Lincoln Park for classy cocktails and girl talk. Her maid of honor Tara, a blonde tornado who treats discretion like a communicable disease, had been posting Instagram stories all week about the epic night they had planned. But when I checked the location tags on their posts, they weren't at any wine bar. They were at Howl, a dive bar on the south side known for cheap beer, pool tables, and the kind of crowd that considers a clean criminal record optional. I drove over around 10 p.m., telling myself I was just being paranoid. Maybe they'd changed venues. Maybe Tara had tagged the wrong location. Maybe I was turning into one of those controlling guys who tracks his girlfriend's every move. But when I saw Greg's cherry red Mustang in the parking lot, I knew my paranoia was just pattern recognition. I parked 3 spaces down and waited. The October air was crisp enough to keep me alert, and the bar's neon sign cast everything in an appropriately hellish glow. Through the window, I could see Marissa at the pool table, leaning over to line up a shot while Greg stood behind her, his hands on her hips, adjusting her stance with the kind of attention to detail that had nothing to do with billiards. Her bridesmaids, Tara, Emily, and Kayla, were clustered around a high-top table, drinks in hand, watching the show, like it was dinner theater. Emily kept glancing toward the door nervously. Kayla looked uncomfortable, checking her phone every few minutes, but Tara was eating it up, taking pictures and videos with the enthusiasm of a nature photographer documenting a rare species. I sat in my car for 2 hours, watching my fiancée flirt with another man while her friends provided cover. When they finally left, Marissa and Greg lingered by his car for a goodbye that lasted long enough for me to snap a dozen photos through my phone's zoom lens. The kiss wasn't just a peck between coworkers. It was the kind of kiss that comes with a soundtrack and a fade to black. When they finally broke apart, Greg whispered something in her ear that made her laugh and swat his chest playfully. Then she got in her own car and drove home to the apartment we shared, where she'd slip into bed next to me and pretend she'd spent the evening discussing centerpieces and seating charts. I followed her home at a distance, my mind racing through possibilities. Maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe it was just the alcohol. Maybe I'd misread the situation entirely. But when I got home 20 minutes after her, she was already in the shower, humming some song I didn't recognize. Her phone was charging on her nightstand, and for the first time in weeks, she'd forgotten to flip it face down. The screen lit up with a text notification. Can't wait for next time. You're incredible. G. Next time. Not that was a mistake, or we can't do this again. Next time. I screenshotted the message before the phone locked again, then sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the evidence of my fiancé's betrayal. The shower was still running. She was probably washing his cologne off her skin, getting ready to come to bed and kiss me goodnight with the same lips that had been on his an hour ago. That's when I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to have some dramatic midnight showdown that would give her a chance to spin the story or manipulate me with tears and apologies. Marissa Hart was a professional bullshit artist who could sell ice to Eskimos and make them feel grateful for the privilege. But she'd never dealt with someone who specialized in exposing lies for a living. I was going to let her dig her own grave, and then I was going to bury her in it. The wedding was in 3 days. She wanted to play games? Fine. I'd show her what a real game looked like. Wedding morning arrived with the kind of crisp October sunshine that photographers love and grooms usually appreciate. I felt like I was preparing for my own execution, except I was the one holding the axe. I'd spent the last 3 days playing the perfect fiancé, nervous about the ceremony, excited about our future, grateful for her patience with my pre-wedding jitters. It was the performance of my life, and Marissa bought every second of it. She'd been extra affectionate since the Bachelorette party, probably overcompensating for her guilt. More kisses, more I love yous, more talk about our honeymoon in Cabo. It would have been touching if I didn't know she was planning to text Greg from the beach while I was buying her drinks. The ceremony was at St. Michael's, a Gothic revival church that looked like it was designed by someone who believed marriage should feel appropriately intimidating. Marissa had chosen it because it photographed well. I was starting to appreciate the symbolism. My best man, Sam, arrived at my hotel room at 9 a.m. with coffee and the kind of hangover that suggested he'd taken his bachelor party duties seriously the night before. "You ready for this, brother?" he asked, squinting against the morning light like a vampire who'd missed curfew. "As ready as anyone can be," I said, which was technically true. Sam studied my face with the careful attention of someone who'd known me since college. "You seem weird. Calm, weird. Usually, you're bouncing off the walls when you're stressed. Maybe I'm finally growing up. Or maybe you're having a breakdown and this is what denial looks like." He sipped his coffee and winced. Either way, I brought backup. He pulled a flask from his jacket pocket, the silver one I'd given him as a groomsman gift. Liquid courage. For both of us. I almost laughed. If he only knew what I had planned, he'd realize I was the only person in this wedding party who didn't need courage. I needed a good lawyer and maybe a head start on the highway. "Save it for the reception," I said. "I want to remember every second of today." The church was already bustling with activity when we arrived. Marissa's family had taken over the bride's preparation room like a military operation, complete with a photographer, a makeup artist, and enough flowers to stock a funeral home. The groom's side was considerably more low-key. Me, Sam, and my 2 other groomsmen drinking coffee and trying to figure out how to fold pocket squares. I could hear Marissa's voice through the wall, bright and animated, as she directed the chaos. She sounded genuinely happy, which should have made me feel guilty about what I was planning. Instead, it just reminded me how good she was at performing. At 11:30, Father McKenna pulled me aside for our final pre-ceremony chat. He was a soft-spoken man in his 60s who'd been marrying couples at St. Michael's for longer than I'd been alive. He had the kind of gentle authority that made you want to confess your sins, even if you were Jewish. "Any last-minute doubts, Nicholas?" he asked, settling into the chair across from my desk in his office. Actually, Father, there is something I need to discuss with you. I pulled out my phone and opened the video I'd recorded at Howell. I think you should see this before the ceremony. He watched in silence, his expression shifting from confusion to concern to something that looked like disappointment. When it was over, he set the phone down carefully and folded his hands. This is your fiancé? 3 nights ago. And you're certain you want to proceed with the ceremony? I'm certain I want everyone to know who they're really celebrating today. Father McKenna was quiet for a long moment. Nicholas, I understand you're hurt and angry, but public humiliation isn't the same as justice. If you're not prepared to forgive her, perhaps you should postpone. With respect, Father, forgiveness is earned. And Marissa hasn't even admitted she's done anything wrong. She's planning to stand at that altar and promise to forsake all others while she's texting her boyfriend under her wedding dress. I showed him the screenshots of her messages with Greg, including the ones from this morning. Can't wait to see you at the reception. Try not to stare during the ceremony. G, and her response, I'll be thinking about you the whole time. The priest's face hardened. I see. I'm not asking you to embarrass her, Father. I'm asking you to let me tell the truth. Isn't that what marriage is supposed to be built on? He was quiet for another minute, then nodded slowly. Very well. But Nicholas, once you do this, there's no taking it back. Are you prepared for the consequences? I've been preparing for 3 days. The ceremony was scheduled for noon. By 11:45, the church was packed with 150 guests who'd come to celebrate our love story. Marissa's side was a sea of designer dresses and expensive handbags. My side was more casual, but just as enthusiastic. Everyone was smiling, chattering excitedly, checking their phones to make sure they had enough storage for photos. Greg was sitting in the 3rd row on Marissa's side, looking uncomfortable in a suit that probably cost more than my car payment. He kept checking his phone and glancing toward the bride's room. I wondered if they were texting each other, sharing some private joke about the poor sucker who was about to marry his leftovers. At exactly noon, the wedding march began. The bridesmaids processed down the aisle in their dusty rose dresses, each one beaming like they were walking toward their own happy ending. Tara caught my eye and winked. Emily looked nervous, like she was afraid I might have figured something out. Kayla just looked relieved that her part was almost over. Then the music swelled, and everyone stood. Marissa appeared at the back of the church like something out of a fairy tale. Her dress was a masterpiece of silk and lace that had cost more than some people's cars. Her veil cascaded behind her like a waterfall, and her smile was radiant enough to power the church's lighting system. She looked absolutely beautiful. She also looked like a woman who was about to get everything she wanted. That was about to change. She glided down the aisle with her father, nodding graciously at guests, her eyes locked on mine with what looked like genuine love and excitement. When she reached the altar, her father kissed her cheek and placed her hand in mine. Take care of my little girl, he whispered. I'll make sure she gets exactly what she deserves, I whispered back. Father McKenna began the ceremony with the traditional opening, welcoming everyone and talking about the sanctity of marriage. I let him get through the preliminaries, watching Marissa's face as she gazed at me with what looked like adoration. She was playing her part perfectly. When we reached the part about speaking now or forever holding your peace, Father McKenna paused and looked at me. I nodded. Before we continue, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the church's sound system, I think everyone should know what kind of woman they're here to celebrate. The church went dead silent. Marissa's smile faltered, confusion flickering across her face. Nick? She whispered. What are you doing? I pulled out my phone and held it up so the guests could see the screen. 3 nights ago, at her bachelorette party, my fiancée was making out with her coworker in a bar parking lot. Would you like to see the video? The silence exploded into gasps, murmurs, and the sound of 150 people shifting in their seats to get a better view. Marissa's face went white, then red, then white again. That's not... I can explain... Can you explain this too? I pulled out printed copies of her text messages with Greg and began reading them aloud. I can't wait to feel your hands on me again. The wedding is just a formality. Nick will never know. Marissa grabbed for the papers, but I held them out of reach. Or, how about this one from this morning? I'll be thinking about you the whole time I'm saying my vows. The church erupted. Guests were standing, shouting, pulling out their own phones to record the chaos. Marissa's mother was screaming something about family honor. Her father looked like he was considering murder. Greg had bolted for the exit, pushing through the crowd like the building was on fire. "You bastard!" Marissa screamed, her fairy tale composure finally cracking. "You vindictive, pathetic bastard! You couldn't just talk to me like an adult?" Like an adult? I laughed, and the sound echoed off the church's vaulted ceiling. Adults don't sneak around behind their fiancé's back. Adults don't lie about wine bars when they're really grinding on their boyfriend at pool tables. Adults don't plan to cheat on their honeymoon before they've even had their first dance. She swung at me, but Sam caught her wrist. "Easy there, Bridezilla. Let me go. Let me go right now." "Gladly," I said. "In fact, consider yourself permanently released from any obligation to pretend you love me. The engagement is off. The marriage is off. And just so we're clear, you're paying me back for the honeymoon." I turned to address the stunned crowd. "Thank you all for coming. There won't be a reception, but I'm sure you've got, plenty to talk about. Drive safely." I walked down the aisle and out of the church, leaving behind the woman who'd tried to make a fool of me and 150 witnesses who'd never forget what they'd seen. The real party was just getting started. By Monday morning, the video of my wedding day revelation had gone viral. Someone, probably Tara, who treated other people's drama like her personal entertainment network, had live-streamed the entire meltdown on Instagram. The hashtag #SudAlterExposed was trending locally, and my phone was buzzing with friend requests from people I'd never met who wanted front-row seats to the aftermath. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt empty, like I'd won a game that nobody else knew we were playing. Marissa had disappeared after the church incident. Her bridesmaids claimed they didn't know where she'd gone, but Emily let slip that she was staying at some hotel downtown, trying to figure out her next move. Her parents had released a statement through their lawyer about private family matters and respecting everyone's privacy during this difficult time. Too late for privacy. The internet had already made its judgment. Greg, meanwhile, had become the most hated man in Chicago's professional community. His LinkedIn profile was flooded with comments about his character and professionalism. Someone had created a fake Yelp page for him with reviews like, "Great at ruining weddings, terrible at keeping secrets," and 5 stars for homewrecking, 0 stars for everything else. I should have been satisfied. But satisfaction felt a lot like anticlimactic when you'd been planning revenge for 3 days and executed it in 3 minutes. That's when I realized I was just getting started. Sam showed up at my apartment Tuesday morning with coffee and bagels, like he was visiting someone in the hospital. "You look like hell," he said, settling onto my couch and surveying the disaster zone that used to be my living room. I'd spent the last 2 days purging everything that reminded me of Marissa, which turned out to be roughly 60% of my possessions. "I feel great," I lied. "Never better." "Uh-huh. That's why you're wearing the same clothes you had on yesterday and your apartment looks like it was hit by a tornado." He wasn't wrong. I'd been living on takeout and spite for 48 hours, and it showed. "I brought sustenance and wisdom," he continued, tossing me a bagel. The sustenance is obvious. The wisdom is this: you got your revenge. You exposed her. You humiliated her in front of everyone she knows. Mission accomplished. Now maybe it's time to move on before you turn into one of those guys who spends the next 5 years plotting elaborate schemes against his ex. I'm not plotting anything, I said, which was technically true. I'd already plotted everything. Now I was just executing. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. M. I showed. Sam, the screen. Looks like the lady wants to negotiate. Don't do it, man. Whatever she wants to say, it's just going to mess with your head. She's probably going to try to explain or apologize or blame you for embarrassing her. None of that is going to make you feel better. He was right, of course. But he didn't understand that feeling better wasn't the goal anymore. The goal was making sure Marissa and Greg understood that actions have consequences, and some consequences last longer than others. I texted back, "Nothing to talk about. Enjoy your new life." Her response came immediately. "Please, just give me 5 minutes. I can explain everything." Already explained everything at the altar. Thanks, though. Nick, please. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But what you did was cruel and vindictive and completely disproportionate. You ruined my life. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed, "You ruined your own life. I just made sure everyone got to watch." Then I blocked her number. Sam was watching me with the expression of someone who just realized his friend might be having a breakdown. "Nick, buddy, I'm starting to worry about you." "Don't. I'm fine." "You're really not. You're sitting in a destroyed apartment obsessing over your ex, and you've got that look in your eyes that serial killers get in movies right before they start collecting trophies." "I'm not obsessing. I'm just making sure the story ends properly. The story is over. She cheated, you caught her, you exposed her. The end. Anything else is just you torturing yourself." But Sam didn't understand. The story wasn't over until everyone involved had learned their lesson, and Greg Landry hadn't learned anything yet, except that running away from churches was harder in dress shoes. I spent the rest of Tuesday researching Greg's life, with the thoroughness of someone preparing for a job interview. Social media, professional networks, public records, everything was fair game. By evening, I had a complete picture of Greg G-Man Landry, and it wasn't flattering. He was 36, divorced, no kids, and worked in sales for the same PR firm as Marissa. His Instagram was a monument to his own ego. Gym selfies, car photos, inspirational quotes about grinding and winning, overlaid on pictures of sunsets he'd probably never actually watched. He lived in a townhouse in Lincoln Park that he was clearly struggling to afford, based on the credit reports I'd pulled through my company's background check system. More importantly, he had a reputation. A little digging through his ex-wife's social media revealed a pattern of infidelity that went back years. Marissa wasn't his first affair, and she probably wouldn't be his last. He was a serial cheater who targeted women in committed relationships, apparently for the thrill of the conquest. That changed things. Marissa might have been a victim as much as a perpetrator, but she'd still chosen to betray me, and she'd still planned to go through with the wedding while carrying on her affair. Victim or not, she'd made her choices. And now, I was going to make mine. Wednesday morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Greg's gym. It was one of those trendy CrossFit places where people paid premium prices to lift heavy things and post about it on social media. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and gossip spread faster than protein powder. I waited in the parking lot until I saw him arrive, then followed him inside. The gym was busy with the morning crowd, young professionals getting their workout in before heading to offices where they'd spend the day complaining about being sore. Greg was holding a court by the free weights, regaling a small crowd with some story that involved a lot of gesturing and laughter. He looked completely unaffected by the events of the weekend, like ruining someone's wedding was just another Tuesday for him. That was about to change. I approached the group with a friendly smile. "Excuse me, are you Greg Landry?" He turned, and I watched his face change as he recognized me. "Oh, shit. Hey man, look, I just wanted to thank you," I said, loud enough for his audience to hear, "for showing me who my fiancé really was before I made the biggest mistake of my life." The gym got quieter. People were starting to pay attention. Okay, Greg said, glancing around nervously. "Look, I'm sorry about how everything went down. That wasn't supposed to happen." "What wasn't supposed to happen? The affair or getting caught?" Now everyone was listening. Phones were coming out. Someone in the corner was definitely recording. "The affair wasn't supposed to happen either," Greg said, trying to sound sincere. "It just kind of developed. These things happen, you know?" "Do they?" "Because I've been faithful to every woman I've ever dated, and somehow I've managed to avoid accidentally sleeping with other people's fiancés. Maybe you could share your secret?" Greg's face was getting red. His audience was starting to look uncomfortable, like they were witnessing something they shouldn't be seeing. "Look, man, I get that you're upset." "Upset?" I laughed. "I'm grateful. You did me a favor. I just wanted to make sure everyone here knows what kind of man they're working out with. Greg Landry, home wrecker. Greg Landry, who seduces engaged women and then runs away when their weddings explode. Greg Landry, who's probably already looking for his next victim." I turned to release the crowd. "Ladies, if Greg here starts paying extra attention to you, you might want to check if he knows your relationship status first. He seems to prefer women who are already taken." "You're out of line," Greg said, but his voice cracked a little. "Am I? Because I've got video evidence that says otherwise. Would you like me to show everyone what you and Marissa were doing in the parking lot at Howell? I've got great footage of your hands-on pool instruction technique." Greg lunged at me, which was exactly what I'd been hoping for. I sidestepped easily, and he stumbled into a rack of dumbbells, sending weights clattering across the floor. The sound echoed through the gym like a percussion symphony. "Whoa there, G-Man," I said, using his ridiculous nickname. "Careful. You don't want to hurt yourself. How would you explain the bruises to your next girlfriend's fiancé?" The gym manager was heading our way, looking like someone who'd had enough drama for one morning. "Gentlemen, I'm going to have to ask you both to leave." "No problem," I said. "I was just finishing up. Greg, thanks again for the life lesson. Really, I owe you one." I walked out of the gym feeling better than I had in days. Behind me, I could hear Greg trying to explain himself to his audience, his voice getting higher and more defensive with each word. By Thursday, the gym incident had made its way onto social media too. Someone had posted the video with the caption, "Cheater gets confronted at CrossFit," and it was making the rounds on local Facebook groups and Twitter feeds. Greg's professional reputation was taking a beating. His company's Yelp page was suddenly full of reviews questioning their moral standards and employee screening processes. Someone had started a petition to have him fired, which seemed excessive even to me. But the internet has never been known for proportional responses. Marissa had gone completely dark. No social media activity, no public statements, no attempts to contact me. According to Emily, who'd apparently decided I was the lesser of two evils and was now feeding me information, she was devastated and considering leaving town. Good. Let her start over somewhere else, with someone who didn't know her history. Maybe she'd learn something from the experience. Maybe she'd be faithful to the next guy. Or maybe she'd just get better at hiding her affairs. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. but I wasn't quite finished with Greg. Friday night, I was nursing a beer at Murphy's Pub, a dive bar 3 blocks from my apartment, when Tara slid into the booth across from me. She looked different without her bridesmaid makeup and formal dress, younger, more vulnerable, like someone who just realized that other people's drama could splash back on her. "We need to talk," she said, stealing a sip of my beer without asking. "About what?" "About Marissa. About what you're doing to her." I laughed. What I'm doing to her. I'm not doing anything to her. I'm not texting her, calling her, or bothering her in any way. I'm leaving her alone to deal with the consequences of her own choices. You know that's not what I mean. Tara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. The gym thing with Greg, the social media campaign, the way you're systematically destroying both of their reputations. That's not leaving them alone. I went to Greg's gym once to thank him for his honesty. If other people want to draw their own conclusions about his character, that's their business. Cut the shit, Nick. I know what you're doing, because I'd probably do the same thing if someone screwed me over like that. But you need to know something about what really happened. She paused, looking around the bar like she was worried about being overheard. The bachelorette party wasn't Marissa's idea. It was mine. Okay. No, you don't understand. The whole thing with Greg, that wasn't some grand love affair. It was a dare. I set down my beer and stared at her. A dare? Emily and I bet her she couldn't seduce Greg before the wedding. It was supposed to be harmless flirting, maybe a kiss at the bachelorette party. We put up $200 each. It was just supposed to be funny, you know, like, look how easy it is to make guys fall for you, even when you're about to get married. The bar suddenly felt very quiet, even though nothing had actually changed. You're telling me my fiancé cheated on me because of a $400 bet. It wasn't supposed to go that far, but Greg was really into her, and she got caught up in the attention, and then it just escalated. The pool table thing, the parking lot, all of it. She kept saying she was going to call it off, but she didn't want to lose the bet. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. And you filmed it. Emily filmed it. She was supposed to delete it afterward, but... Tara shrugged. She didn't like Marissa very much. There was some drama with a guy they both liked a few years ago, so when she realized how far things had gone, she decided to send you the video anonymously. Emily sent me the video. She thought you deserved to know, but she also thought it would be funny to watch Marissa's perfect life fall apart. 2 birds, 1 stone. I sat back in the booth, trying to process this information. My fiancé had betrayed me for $400 and bragging rights. Her maid of honor had filmed it and sent me the evidence out of spite. Her other bridesmaid was now sitting across from me, spilling secrets because she felt guilty about her role in the disaster. Why are you telling me this? Because Marissa's falling apart. Like really falling apart. She lost her job yesterday. Her parents aren't speaking to her. She's been staying at that hotel for a week because she can't face going back to her apartment. And Greg won't return her calls because he's dealing with his own mess. Good. Nick, she made a stupid mistake because of a stupid bet. She doesn't deserve to have her entire life destroyed over it. She made a choice. Multiple choices. She chose to take the bet. She chose to flirt with Greg. She chose to kiss him. She chose to keep seeing him. She chose to plan to go through with the wedding while she was sleeping with someone else. Those weren't mistakes, they were decisions. And you know what the worst part is? If you hadn't told me about the bet, I might have actually felt sorry for her eventually. I might have thought she was just a woman who fell for the wrong guy and made some bad choices. But now, I know she traded Our entire relationship for $400 and a laugh with her friends. Tara was quiet for a moment. So, what are you going to do now? Now? Now, I'm going to finish what she started. I left Tara at the bar and drove home, my mind racing with possibilities. The bet changed everything. It meant Marissa's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was transactional. She'd literally sold our relationship for pocket change and entertainment value. But it also meant Emily had played me. She'd sent me the video not out of concern for my well-being, but because she wanted to watch Marissa suffer. I'd been a weapon in someone else's revenge plot, without even knowing it. That was unacceptable. Saturday morning, I called Emily and asked her to meet me for coffee. She agreed, probably thinking I wanted to thank her for exposing Marissa's affair. She had no idea I knew about her real motives. We met at a Starbucks in Lincoln Park, close enough to Greg's neighborhood that I could kill two birds with one stone if the opportunity arose. Emily showed up looking nervous but pleased with herself, like someone who'd just gotten away with the perfect crime. "I'm glad you called," she said, settling into the chair across from me with her venti latte. "I wasn't sure if you knew it was me who sent you that video." "Tara told me?" "She also told me about the bet." Emily's face changed. "Oh, she wasn't supposed to... that wasn't really $400, Emily? That's what my relationship was worth to you people?" "It wasn't like that. It was just supposed to be harmless fun. Marissa was always so perfect, so smug about her perfect job and perfect fiancé and perfect life. We just wanted to see if she was really as good as she pretended to be. And when you realized she wasn't, you decided to destroy her life. I decided to tell you the truth. What you did with that information was your choice." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. Emily was pretty in a generic way, the kind of woman who'd probably spent her whole life being overshadowed by more charismatic friends like Marissa. The kind of woman who might harbor resentments for years before finding the perfect opportunity for payback. "You know what I think, Emily? I think you've been waiting for a chance to hurt Marissa for a long time. The bet was just an excuse. You wanted to see her fail, and when she took the bait, you made sure I'd find out in the most devastating way possible. That's not... You could have told me privately. You could have sent me the video with an explanation. Instead, you sent it anonymously and let me stumble around trying to figure out what to do with it. You wanted maximum chaos." Emily's face was getting red. She deserved it. Do you know what it's like being friends with someone who thinks she's better than everyone else? Someone who gets everything handed to her and then acts like she earned it? So, this was never about protecting me. This was about hurting her. It was about both. You deserved to know the truth, and she deserved to face consequences for her actions. I nodded slowly. You're right. She did deserve consequences. But so do you. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screen. I'd been recording our conversation since she'd arrived. I mean, Emily, that I don't like being manipulated, and I really don't like finding out that someone used me as a weapon in their personal vendetta. You can't what? Share this recording with Marissa? Let her know that her best friend set her up? That the video that destroyed her life wasn't just bad luck, but deliberate sabotage from someone she trusted? Emily grabbed for my phone, but I pulled it back. Don't worry, I'm not going to send it to her. I'm going to send it to everyone. Nick, please. Your Facebook friends, your co-workers, your family, everyone who knows you. I want them all to hear what kind of person you really are. The kind of person who destroys friendships for entertainment. The kind of person who manipulates grieving fiancés for personal revenge. That's not fair. You can't ruin my life because I told you the truth. I'm not ruining your life, Emily. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth about you, the same way you made sure everyone knew the truth about Marissa. Fair is fair. I stood up and headed for the door, leaving her sitting at the table with her latte and her guilt. Enjoy the consequences. By Sunday evening, the recording was making the rounds on social media. Emily's friends and family were getting a first-hand look at her manipulative side, and the responses were about what you'd expect. Her own sister had commented on the Facebook post, calling her a vindictive bitch who finally got what she deserved. I was starting to understand why people said revenge was a dish best served cold. The anticipation was almost as satisfying as the execution. But I still wasn't finished with Greg. Monday morning, I drove to his townhouse and waited across the street until he left for work. Then I followed him, staying far enough back to avoid detection, but close enough to track his movements. He went to a coffee shop, a dry cleaner, and finally to his office building downtown. I parked in the garage and took the elevator to his floor, where I introduced myself to the receptionist as an old friend who wanted to surprise him. She directed me to his cubicle, where Greg was hunched over his computer, probably trying to salvage what was left of his professional reputation. "Knock, knock," I said, rapping on the cubicle wall. He looked up and his face went white. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to apologize," I said, loud enough for his co-workers to hear. "I think I may have given people the wrong impression about you at the gym the other day." "You... what?" I was angry and hurt, and I said some things that weren't entirely fair. "Yes, you slept with my fiancée. Yes, you helped her lie to me for weeks. Yes, you were planning to continue the affair after our wedding. But that doesn't necessarily make you a bad person." Greg's co-workers were starting to pay attention. A few of them had turned around in their chairs to get a better view of the conversation. "It just makes you someone with flexible moral standards, someone who sees other people's relationships as opportunities rather than boundaries, someone who probably shouldn't be trusted around anyone's girlfriend, wife, or fiancé. But hey, that's just my opinion." "You need to leave," Greg said, standing up. "Right now." "I'm leaving. I just wanted to make sure we were clear about what happened. I wouldn't want anyone here to think you were some kind of predator who targets women in committed relationships. That would be unfair." I turned to address his co-workers. Greg's actually a really dedicated guy. When he sets his sights on someone, he doesn't let little things like engagement rings or wedding dates stop him. That's admirable, in its own way. "Security!" Greg shouted. "I need security up here." "No need," I said, heading for the elevator. "I'm done here. Greg, good luck with everything. I'm sure you'll find another engaged woman to mentor soon." The elevator doors closed on Greg's red face and his co-workers' shocked expressions. By the time I reached the parking garage, I was smiling for the first time in a week. The game was almost over, but I had one final move to make. Tuesday night, I was sitting in my apartment, eating Chinese takeout and watching Netflix, when someone started pounding on my door. Not knocking, pounding, like they were trying to break it down with their fists. I looked through the peephole and saw Marissa standing in the hallway, looking like she'd been hit by a tornado. Her hair was a mess, her makeup was smeared, and she was wearing sweatpants and a Northwestern University hoodie I'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago. She looked like she'd been crying for a week straight. Behind her stood Greg, looking equally disheveled but considerably more angry. His jaw was clenched, his hands were balled into fists, and he was staring at my door like he wanted to kick it in. This was going to be interesting. I opened the door and leaned against the frame, blocking their path into my apartment. Well, well, look what the cat dragged in. Both cats, apparently. "We need to talk," Marissa said. Her voice was hoarse, like she'd been screaming or crying or both. "Do we?" Because I thought we covered everything at the altar. You're a cheater, I'm not. An idiot, and your friends are backstabbing manipulators. What else is there to discuss? You've destroyed our lives, Greg said, stepping forward. Both of our lives. Over what? A stupid mistake. A moment of weakness. A moment of weakness? I laughed. Greg, you were screwing my fiancé for weeks. That's not a moment. That's a lifestyle choice. It wasn't supposed to happen, Marissa said, tears starting to flow again. It was just supposed to be a stupid bet, and then it got out of hand, and then I couldn't figure out how to stop it without losing everything. So you decided to marry me instead. That was your solution. Go through with the wedding, take the honeymoon, and keep screwing Greg on the side until you figured out your next move. No, I was going to end it with Greg after the wedding. I was going to tell him it was over and focus on our marriage. Right. That's why you texted him the morning of our wedding, saying you'd be thinking about him during the ceremony. Marissa's face crumpled. I was scared and confused, and I didn't know what to do. I made terrible choices, but I didn't deserve to have my entire life destroyed over it. Your entire life? I looked her up and down, taking in the sweatpants and the tear-stained face. What exactly have you lost, Marissa? Your job? Your reputation, your friends, your fiancé? Everything, she whispered. Good. Now you know how I felt when I found out the woman I was planning to spend my life with was treating our relationship like a joke. Greg stepped closer, his face flushed with anger. You're a vindictive piece of shit, you know that? What you did at my gym, at my office, that's harassment. I could have you arrested. For what? Telling the truth. I never threatened you, never touched you, never did anything but share the facts about your character with people who might find that information useful. You've made it impossible for me to work. My boss is talking about letting me go. My gym membership got canceled. People cross the street when they see me coming. Sounds like the free market has spoken. Maybe you should consider a career change, something that doesn't involve interacting with women in relationships. You son of a bitch. Greg lunged at me, but I was ready for it. I stepped aside and let him stumble into my apartment, then followed him inside. Marissa came in behind us, closing the door like she was afraid the neighbors might hear what was about to happen. You want to fight me, Greg? Is that going to solve your problems? Because I've got to tell you, assault charges probably won't help your employment situation. He spun around, his fists raised. I'm going to kick your ass. No, you're not. You know why? Because you're a coward. You're the kind of guy who goes after other men's women because you can't handle the competition of dating someone who's actually available. You're the kind of guy who runs away from wedding ceremonies when things get uncomfortable. You're the kind of guy who blames everyone else when his shitty choices catch up with him. Shut up. The truth hurts, doesn't it? You thought you were so smart, stealing someone else's fiancé. You thought you were getting away with something. But now, everyone knows what you really are, and you can't handle it. Greg swung at me, a wild haymaker that would have been devastating if it had connected. But he was angry and sloppy, and I'd been expecting it. I ducked under his punch and shoved him backward, sending him crashing into my coffee table. Greg! Marissa screamed, rushing to help him up. Are you okay? I'm fine, he growled, struggling to his feet. But he won't be. Actually, I'm better than I've been in months, I said. You know why? Because I'm not lying to anyone. I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm not sneaking around behind anyone's back. I'm just a guy who got screwed over and decided to do something about it. What you did was cruel and vindictive and completely disproportionate, Marissa said, echoing her earlier text message. We made mistakes, but we're human beings. We deserved a chance to explain, to apologize, to make things right. You had plenty of chances to make things right. You could have ended the affair. You could have called off the wedding. You could have been honest with me. Instead, you chose to lie and cheat and plan to keep lying and cheating after we were married. I was going to tell you, she said weakly. When? On our first anniversary? Our fifth? When you got pregnant with his kid? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You were planning to build our entire marriage on a foundation of lies, and you're upset that I exposed the truth before you could trap me in it. I walked to my window and looked out at the city lights. You want to know the funny thing? If you'd just been honest with me from the beginning, none of this would have happened. If you'd told me you had feelings for someone else, if you'd asked to postpone the wedding, if you'd given me a chance to process the situation like an adult, I might have been hurt, but I wouldn't have been vindictive. I turned back to face them, but you didn't do that. You chose to lie and cheat and manipulate, and then you acted surprised when there were consequences. You treated me like an idiot, and now you're upset that I proved I'm not one. So what now? Greg asked. You've destroyed both of our lives. Are you satisfied? Is this what winning looks like to you? I considered the question. Was I satisfied? Had I gotten what I wanted? Looking at them, Marissa broken and crying, Greg angry and desperate, I realized that I didn't feel the triumph I'd expected. I felt empty, tired, like I'd spent all my energy on something that ultimately didn't matter. But I also felt free. Free from the lies, free from the pretense, free from the weight of a relationship that had been built on deception. Free to start over with someone who wouldn't treat our love like a commodity to be traded for entertainment. You know what, Greg? You're right. I have destroyed your lives. But here's the thing. You destroyed them yourselves. I just made sure everyone got to watch. I walked to my front door and opened it. Now get out of my apartment, both of you. Go build new lives somewhere else, with someone else, and try not to fuck it up this time. Marissa looked like she wanted to say something else, but Greg grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the door. Come on, we're done here. They walked out into the hallway, and I closed the door behind them. Through the thin walls, I could hear them arguing as they walked toward the elevator. Marissa crying, Greg cursing, both of them blaming each other for the mess they'd created. I went back to my couch, picked up my Chinese takeout, and resumed my Netflix show. On the screen, a detective was explaining to a criminal that actions have consequences, that the truth always comes out eventually, that justice might be delayed, but it's never denied. I couldn't have said it better myself. 3 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Marissa had moved to Denver and was working for a small marketing firm under her maiden name. Greg had been fired from his job and was apparently selling insurance in some suburb I'd never heard of. Emily had moved back in with her parents after her own social circle had turned against her. I'd started dating again, nothing serious, just coffee dates and casual dinners with women who didn't know my history and didn't need to. Women who were actually single, actually honest, actually interested in building something real instead of playing games with other people's hearts. My apartment was different now. Cleaner, simpler, more authentically mine. I'd replaced the furniture Marissa had chosen with pieces I actually liked. I'd painted the walls colors that made me happy instead of colors that photographed well. I'd turned the space into a home instead of a stage set for someone else's performance. I was better. Not perfect, not completely healed, but better, stronger, wiser, less trusting maybe, but more discerning. I'd learned to spot the signs of deception, to trust my instincts, to value honesty over charm. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting free. Free from the lies, free from the drama, free from people who see your love as something to be exploited rather than cherished. Marissa and Greg had taught me a valuable lesson about human nature, about the price of betrayal, about the importance of choosing your partners carefully. It was an expensive education, but it was worth every penny. And if they ever decided to get married themselves, I hoped someone would have the courtesy to warn their future spouses about what they were really getting into. After all, everyone deserves to know the truth about the person they're planning to spend their life with, even if that truth hurts.